Jake Morrison stood on the hill and looked down at the small town they had built. 2 years of hard work had turned empty land into something that looked like home. The houses were simple but strong, made from local wood and stone. Gardens grew between them, full of earth vegetables that somehow grew even better in this alien soil. Children played in the streets while their parents worked in the fields or fixed things that needed fixing. The planet they called New Haven was everything the colony ships had promised. Clean air filled his lungs, and the sun felt warm on his face even though it was a different color than the one back on Earth. The gravity was close enough to normal that nobody felt sick anymore. Rivers ran clean and full of fish that tasted almost like salmon. The soil was so rich that crops grew twice as fast as they did back home. Jake walked down the main street toward the community center where Lisa Carter was probably fixing something again. Lisa could fix anything with metal and wires. She had kept their ship running during the long journey here, and now she kept their generators humming and their water pumps working. He found her under the big communications array, tools spread around her like a metal garden. "How are we doing today?" Jake asked as he crouched down beside her. Lisa slid out from under the equipment and wiped grease from her hands. "The main receiver is picking up some strange signals. Nothing I can make sense of, but they come and go like someone is watching us from far away." Jake frowned. The colony had been alone on this planet for 2 years. Their long-range scanners had never found any signs of intelligent life anywhere in this system. "Could be interference from the solar storms," he said. "Ryan mentioned seeing some unusual aurora last night." "Maybe," Lisa said, but she did not sound sure. "I will keep monitoring it. Better safe than sorry." Ryan Bell found them there an hour later. He was their security coordinator, though there had not been much need for security on New Haven. The biggest problems they faced were crop diseases and equipment failures. Ryan had spent most of his time organizing the volunteer fire brigade and teaching people how to use the medical equipment. "Jake, we need to talk," Ryan said. His face looked serious. "Beth picked up something odd during her night shift. Radio signals that do not match anything in our database." Beth Adams ran their communications center. She had the best ears for signals of anyone in the colony. If she said something was strange, Jake believed her. They walked to the communications building where Beth was sitting in front of a wall of monitors and speakers. "Play it for them," Ryan said. Beth pressed some buttons, and strange sounds filled the room. They were not quite music and not quite speech. The patterns seemed to repeat, but with small changes each time. Jake had never heard anything like it. "How long have you been getting this?" Jake asked. 3 weeks now," Beth said. "Always at night, always from the same direction in space. I tried to trace it, but whoever is sending it is very far away." Jake looked at Ryan and Lisa. They had all been chosen to lead this colony because they were good at solving problems. But this was a problem none of them had trained for. The colony ship had scanning equipment that could detect life signs from orbit. It had found nothing on this planet except plants and animals. No cities, no radio signals, no signs that anyone else lived here. "Could be traders passing through," Jake said. "The galaxy is a big place. Maybe we are not as alone as we thought. Or maybe someone has been here all along and we just did not see them," Ryan said quietly. That night, Jake could not sleep. He walked through the quiet streets of their town, past houses where families were sleeping safely. Old Pete Collins was still awake in his workshop, building new plows for the spring planting. Linda Hayes had left a light on in the school where she taught the colony children. Steve Wright's garage stood ready for tomorrow's work, fixing tractors and trucks. These people had trusted him to lead them to a better life. They had left everything they knew on Earth to follow his dream of building something new on a distant world. Now it seemed they might not be alone after all. Jake climbed back up the hill and sat on the bench they had built there. From this spot he could see their whole settlement. 3,000 people had made this place their home. They grew food and built houses and raised children and lived their lives in peace. Whatever those signals meant, he would not let anything happen to them. Far above in the darkness of space, things moved that Jake could not see. A ship hung motionless between the stars. Its sensors pointed down at the small human town. Inside that ship, beings who had ruled this part of the galaxy for 1,000 years watched the humans sleep and wondered what to do about them. Commander Velthara studied the reports his scouts had brought him. These humans had arrived 2 years ago in a ship that barely deserved the name. Their technology was simple, and their numbers were small. By all the rules his people had learned about emerging civilizations, The humans should have failed within months. Instead, they had thrived. They grew more food than they needed and shared it freely among themselves. When someone got sick, everyone helped take care of them. When storms damaged buildings, the whole community worked together to fix them. They seemed to have no rulers except for a few people they chose to coordinate their work. Velthara had seen thousands of species try to build colonies on new worlds. Most failed because they fought among themselves over resources. The ones that succeeded usually did so by conquering their neighbors and taking what they needed. These humans did neither. They seemed to genuinely care about each other in a way that made no sense to him. The smart thing would be to eliminate them now, before they became a real problem. But something made him hesitate. His own people had rules about interfering with primitive civilizations. The humans had not developed faster than light travel yet. They had no weapons that could threaten a starfaring species. They might never become more than farmers on this one small world. Velthara decided to wait and watch. In his experience, all species eventually showed their true nature. When these humans faced real hardship, they would probably turn on each other like all the others had. Then the collective could safely ignore them. He had no way of knowing that his decision to wait would change the fate of every living being in the galaxy. 6 months had passed since Beth first heard the strange signals, and New Haven looked completely different. What had started as one small town had grown into 4 settlements spread across the fertile valley. Jake Morrison walked the new roads that connected them all, watching people move freely between communities like blood flowing through healthy veins. Danny Rodriguez stood in his experimental fields, showing visitors from the other settlements his latest discovery. He had figured out how to plant 3 different crops in the same field, without them competing for nutrients. Instead, they helped each other grow. The cornstalks gave the beans something to climb on, while the beans put nitrogen back into the soil for the squash to use. Back on Earth, we called this companion planting, Danny explained to the small crowd gathered around him. The old farmers knew about it, but we forgot somewhere along the way. This planet is teaching us to remember. The results spoke for themselves. Where Earth crops might produce 1 harvest per season, Danny's fields were giving them 4 times as much food. Other settlements had started copying his methods, and soon the whole colony had more food than they could eat. They had started preserving the extra for trading with whoever might come looking for supplies. Dr. Nina Walsh walked through the settlements too, but she looked for different things. She had been fighting a running battle with local diseases ever since they arrived. 3 different infections had threatened to wipe out the colony in their first year. Now all 3 were gone, conquered by a combination of earth medicine and careful study of local plants. The purple moss that grows near the rivers, she explained to her medical team, it contains something that fights infection better than anything we brought from Earth. Mrs. Carson was dying from lung fever 2 months ago. Now she is teaching school again. Nina had done more than just cure diseases. She had trained people in every settlement to be basic medics. Now when someone got hurt or sick, help was never far away. The people trusted each other to take care of them, and somehow that trust seemed to make everyone stronger. Up in the communications center, Beth Adams monitored more than just the mysterious signals now. The colony's growth meant more radio traffic between settlements, more data flowing back and forth. She had become the central nervous system of their expanding community. The signals are getting stronger, she told Jake during one of his regular visits, and more frequent. Sometimes I think I can almost understand parts of them. Any idea what they want? Jake asked. That is the strange part, Beth said. They do not seem to want anything. It is like someone is just watching us, taking notes. What Beth did not know was that far above them, Commander Velthara was indeed taking notes. The reports he filed with the Collective Council grew longer every month and more worried. The humans had done something no species in collective records had ever managed. They had built multiple settlements without any central authority forcing cooperation. Each settlement specialized in different things. One focused on farming, another on manufacturing, a third on research. They shared everything freely, as if the whole colony was one big family. Velthara studied the files on thousands of other species the collective had encountered. Every single one had followed the same pattern. They started with cooperation, but as their numbers grew, they formed competing groups. Competition led to conflict. Conflict led to war. War either destroyed them or made them strong enough to threaten their neighbors. The humans seemed immune to this pattern. When their population doubled from 3,000 to 6,000, they built new settlements instead of fighting over resources. When problems arose between settlements, they sent their best people to solve them together. They had no armies, no weapons of war, no signs of the aggression that marked every other dangerous species. This made them the most terrifying threat the collective had ever encountered. Elder Gismora read Velthara's reports with growing unease. She had lived for 3 centuries and seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The ones that survived long enough to reach the stars always had one thing in common. They were killers. They had proven their strength by conquering their home worlds and everyone on them. Commander, she spoke into her communication device. Are you certain about these observations? Yes, Elder Velthara's voice came back. I have watched them for 8 months now. They have faced every challenge that normally destroys emerging civilizations. Food shortages when their crops failed in the winter storms. Disease outbreaks that killed dozens of their people. Equipment failures that left settlements without power for weeks. Each time they responded the same way, they helped each other. And no signs of military development. None. They have hunting weapons and tools, but nothing designed for war. Their security force exists mainly to organize rescue operations and prevent accidents. Elder Gismora ended the communication and stared out at the stars. In her long life, she had seen what happened when cooperative species reached the galaxy. They did not conquer through force. Instead, they inspired others to join them willingly. They built alliances that could challenge even the mighty collective. The smart thing would be to eliminate the humans now, before they developed space travel. One ship could sterilize their entire world in minutes. But the collective had rules about interference with primitive species. Rules that kept them from looking like the tyrants their enemies claimed they were. Back on New Haven, Dr. Karen Stone made a discovery that would have changed everything if she had shared it. Deep core samples from her geological surveys showed that the planet contained rare minerals essential for faster-than-light travel. Not just small amounts, but vast deposits that could power 1,000 starships. Karen stared at the data on her computer screen and made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of announcing the discovery, she encrypted the files and locked them away. Some instinct told her that knowledge like this would bring visitors they were not ready to meet. She walked to her window and looked out at the peaceful settlements. Children played in the streets while their parents worked in gardens and workshops. Tony Parker was helping his neighbors build a new bridge over the stream that ran between 2 settlements. Amy Brooks was giving flying lessons to anyone who wanted to learn to pilot the small aircraft they had built from salvaged materials. These people had found something precious on this distant world, a way of living that made everyone stronger instead of just making a few people rich and powerful. Karen would protect that secret as long as she could. That evening, Jake called a meeting of the settlement coordinators. Representatives came from all 4 communities to share news and solve problems together. They sat in a circle in the main hall, no one person more important than any other. We need to talk about expansion, Jake said. Our population is growing faster than we expected. Families are having more children. And some of the other colony ships from Earth are asking if they can join us. The southern continent looks promising, said the representative from Settlement 3. Good soil, plenty of water, and far enough away that we won't crowd each other. We should send a survey team, suggested the woman from Settlement 4, but not to claim the land, to make sure we can live there without damaging what is already growing. This was how they made every decision, not through power or politics, but through careful thought about what was best for everyone. They would debate for hours if necessary, but in the end they always found a solution that worked. High above them, Velthara listened to their radio communications and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of human weapons or human armies, but fear of human example. If other species saw what the humans were building, they might start asking why their own civilizations could not be the same way. The collective's power depended on other species believing that conflict was natural, that cooperation was impossible, that only the strong deserved to rule. The humans were proving all of that wrong simply by living their lives. Velthara began composing his most urgent report yet. The council needed to understand. These humans were not just another primitive species to be catalogued and ignored. They were the beginning of something that could reshape the entire galaxy. The question was whether the collective would act before it was too late. The morning started like any other on New Haven, but it would end with everything changed forever. Jake Morrison was reviewing supply reports when Beth Adams burst through his office door, her face pale with excitement and fear. "Jake, you need to hear this right now," she said, dragging him toward the communications center. Something big just happened up there. The radio crackled with a signal unlike anything they had received before. Not the mysterious watching signals they had grown used to, but a desperate call for help in a language made of clicks and whistles that somehow seemed familiar. "It is a distress signal," Beth said, adjusting the controls to clean up the transmission. "Whatever is sending it is in serious trouble. Life support failing, engines dead, and they are falling toward the gas giant." Jake stared at the readout. The signal was coming from somewhere beyond their moon in the empty space between New Haven and the system's largest planet. "How long until they crash?" 6 hours, maybe 7, Beth said. "Jake, this changes everything. We are not alone." Within minutes, the news had spread through all 4 settlements. People gathered around radios and communication screens, listening to the alien voices calling for help across the darkness of space. Some were afraid, others excited, but everyone understood that this moment would divide their history into before and after. Amy Brooks was already running toward the spaceport before Jake could call her. She had been their best pilot since the journey from Earth, and the small shuttles they had built for moving between settlements were the only ships they had that could reach space. "Amy, wait," Jake called after her. "We do not know anything about these aliens. They could be dangerous." Amy stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with determination. "Jake, when we were kids, what did our parents teach us about people calling for help? That you help them if you can." "Then what are we even talking about?" Amy said. "Someone is dying up there. Maybe they are good people. Maybe they are bad people, but right now they are just people who need help." Dr. Nina Walsh was already loading medical supplies into Amy's shuttle. "I am coming with you," she announced. "If they are hurt, they will need someone who knows medicine." "Nina, you have never treated an alien before," Jake pointed out. "I have never treated a human who was dying in space before either," Nina replied. "But I know the basics. Stop bleeding, help breathing, keep the heart working. How different can they be?" Greg Turner joined them with a toolkit full of repair equipment. Danny Rodriguez climbed aboard with emergency supplies. In less than an hour, they had assembled a rescue team that represented the best of what humanity could offer: courage, skill, and the simple willingness to help strangers in need. Jake watched their shuttle climb into the pale sky and disappear among the stars. He had just sent his people on a mission that could get them all killed, based on nothing more than alien voices crying for help. But as he looked around at the faces of the colonists who had gathered to see them off, he saw no fear or anger at his decision. Instead, he saw pride. The rescue took 3 hours of careful flying through radiation storms and debris fields. Amy's hands never shook on the controls, even when chunks of metal the size of houses tumbled past their tiny shuttle. When they finally found the alien ship, it was barely holding together. The vessel was unlike anything humans had ever imagined. It seemed to be grown rather than built, with smooth curves and organic-looking surfaces that pulsed with faint light. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with atmosphere bleeding out through cracks in what might have been its skin. "There," Nina pointed at what looked like an airlock. "If that is how they get in and out, we can probably dock with it." The alien ship was 10 times larger than their shuttle, but Amy managed to bring them alongside the damaged airlock with the gentleness of a feather landing on water. Greg worked with tools he had never seen before to connect their systems to the alien ones. Somehow, he made it work. The aliens they found inside were nothing like the monsters of human science fiction. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that showed intelligence and fear. 3 of them were unconscious, their breathing shallow and rapid. 2 others were trying desperately to keep their ship's systems working with tools that sparked and smoked in their delicate hands. Nina moved among the injured aliens, with the same calm efficiency she brought to treating human patients. Their blood was green instead of red, but it was still blood. Their hearts beat in their chests just faster than human hearts. When she gave them oxygen, they breathed easier. When she stopped their bleeding, they grew stronger. The conscious aliens watched her work with amazement. One of them, who seemed to be their leader, made soft sounds that might have been gratitude. Nina smiled at him and continued her work, speaking in the gentle voice she used with all her patience. "You are going to be fine," she said, even though he could not understand her words. "We are here to help." Greg and Danny worked on the ship's damaged systems with the same cooperation they brought to fixing tractors back home. The alien technology was strange, but the principles were the same. Energy flowed through circuits, pumps moved fluids, computers processed information. They bypassed damaged components and rerouted power, making repairs that would hold long enough to get everyone to safety. Amy kept their shuttle steady during the entire operation, maintaining the delicate connection between the two ships while radiation storms raged around them. Her concentration never wavered, even when alarms started sounding in both vessels. When they finally returned to New Haven with 5 alien survivors aboard their shuttle, the whole colony was waiting for them. Jake had prepared the medical center and cleared a space for the alien ship to land safely. He had also called a colony meeting to discuss what this meant for their future. The aliens were members of a species that called themselves Zephyrians. Their leader, who gave his name as something that sounded like Velthara, spoke through a translation device they had salvaged from their ship. His first words changed everything the humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. "You are not the first species we have encountered," he said, his artificial voice crackling through the translator, "but you are the first to risk your lives for strangers who might have been your enemies." Jake looked around the room at his fellow colonists. These were farmers and teachers and mechanics who had just made contact with an alien civilization by doing what came naturally to them, helping people in trouble. "We do not know how to be enemies," Jake said simply. "We only know how to be neighbors." Velthara's large dark eyes seemed to study Jake's face for a long moment. "That is what makes you the most dangerous species we have ever encountered." The room fell silent. Nina looked up from where she was still monitoring her alien patients. Amy frowned in confusion. Greg and Danny exchanged worried glances. "Dangerous," Jake repeated. "We just saved your lives." "Yes," Velthara said. "And that is exactly why my people are afraid of you." Over the next few hours, Velthara explained things that shattered the humans' understanding of their place in the universe. The galaxy was not empty and waiting for them to explore it. Instead, it was controlled by a vast alliance called the Collective, which had maintained order among thousands of species for millennia. The Collective's power was based on a simple principle: species that survived long enough to reach the stars did so by being ruthless. They conquered their enemies, exploited their resources, and expanded through strength alone. This made them predictable and controllable. The humans violated every rule the Collective had learned about emerging civilizations. They shared instead of hoarding. They cooperated instead of competing. They helped strangers instead of viewing them as threats. In the Collective's experience, species that behaved this way were not weak. They were the ones that inspired others to rebel. "Your colony is small and your technology is primitive," Velthara explained, "but my superiors believe you represent an existential threat to everything the Collective has built." "Because we rescued you," Amy said, still not understanding. "Because you rescued us without asking what you would gain from it," Velthara corrected. In the Collective's experience, species that help others without expecting reward are the ones that eventually unite entire sectors of space against established authority. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. These 3,000 colonists who just wanted to grow food and raise children and live peaceful lives had somehow become the center of a galactic crisis they never asked for. But as he looked around the room at his people, he saw the same determination in their faces that had carried them across the void between stars. They had not come this far to give up on who they were. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Velthara's expression was unreadable behind his alien features. "Now I have to decide whether to call for a fleet to destroy your colony, or to do something that has never been done before in collective history, which is join you." The story of the human rescue spread through alien space faster than wildfire through dry grass. Velthara had tried to keep it secret, but the other crew members of his ship told their families, who told their friends, who whispered it to anyone who would listen. Within weeks, beings across 100 worlds had heard about the humans who risked everything to save strangers. On New Haven, life continued much as it always had. Jake Morrison walked through the growing settlements, watching his people adapt to their new reality with the same practical approach they brought to everything else. The Zephyrians had chosen to stay, at least for now, and they were teaching the humans about the wider galaxy while learning human ways themselves. Belthera had set up a small camp near Settlement 2, where his people were recovering from their ordeal. Dr. Nina Walsh visited them daily, fascinated by the differences and similarities between human and Zephyrian medicine. The aliens healed faster than humans but were more sensitive to infection. Their bones were lighter but their muscles were stronger. Nina documented everything, building the foundation for interspecies medical knowledge. "They are not so different from us," she told Jake during one of their evening meetings. "They feel pain, they worry about their families, they want their children to be safe. The same things we want." Pete Collins had become friends with a Zephyrian engineer named Kes Tarn, despite the language barrier. They worked together in Pete's workshop, sharing techniques for metalworking and construction. Pete showed Kes Tarn how humans used simple tools to create complex solutions. Kes Tarn demonstrated Zephyrian methods that could shape metal with sound waves instead of heat. "Smart people," Pete said to anyone who would listen. "Different smart, but still smart." The real changes were happening far beyond New Haven's borders. On distant worlds throughout collective space, other species had begun asking dangerous questions. If humans could live in peace with 4 different settlements sharing resources freely, why did their own worlds need the collective's iron control? If strangers could risk their lives for aliens they had never met, why were they taught that cooperation was impossible? Linda Hayes received a message that changed everything. It came through the colony's communication array, transmitted in broken English by someone who had learned the language from intercepted human broadcasts. "My name is Tess Rin of the Altarian people," the message began. "We have heard the story of your rescue of the Zephyrians. Our world has been under collective rule for 300 years. We want to learn how you live in peace. Can you teach us?" Jake stared at the message transcript, understanding immediately what it meant. The humans had become a symbol to oppressed species across the galaxy, whether they wanted to be or not. More messages followed, from mining colonies that wanted to share resources instead of fighting over them, from research stations where different species were secretly cooperating on projects the collective had forbidden, from entire worlds where people were beginning to question why they needed rulers who governed through fear. Beth Adams worked around the clock to handle the flood of communications. Her small team had grown to include several Zephyrians who helped translate messages from dozens of different species. The communications center had become the unofficial embassy for a rebellion that nobody had planned. "We are getting reports of unrest on 17 different worlds," Beth told Jake during their morning briefing. "Species that have been enemies for centuries are talking about working together. Some collective commanders are reporting that their own crews are asking why they cannot be more like the humans." Meanwhile, Danny Rodriguez had made another breakthrough that would reshape the galaxy. Working with Kes Tarn, he had developed new agricultural techniques that combined human knowledge with Zephyrian biotechnology. The result was food production methods that could feed billions while actually improving the planets where they were used. "Look at this." Danny showed Jake a field where earth corn grew alongside Zephyrian food plants in perfect harmony. "Their plants put minerals into the soil that our plants need. Our plants create compounds that help theirs fight disease. It is like they were meant to work together." The implications were staggering. Famine had been one of the collective's most powerful tools for controlling population growth. Worlds that could not feed themselves had to accept collective rule in exchange for food shipments. Danny's techniques could make any planet self-sufficient in a single growing season. Dr. Karen Stone finally decided to share her geological discoveries with Jake and the other leaders. The rare minerals beneath New Haven were not just valuable for faster-than-light travel. They were essential for the energy systems that powered collective fleets. The humans were literally sitting on top of the resources needed to challenge collective dominance. "We could become the richest colony in human space," Karen explained as she showed them her survey data, "or we could become the biggest target in the galaxy." Jake studied the mineral maps and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "We share it," Karen repeated. "Jake, there are enough rare minerals here to power 1,000 starships." "Then we help 1,000 species build starships," Jake said simply. "The collective stays in power because they control resources that other people need. What happens if those resources become freely available?" Steve Wright had been listening to the conversation from his usual spot in the corner. "You are talking about changing how the entire galaxy works." "No," Jake said. I am talking about giving everyone the same choice we had when we came here. The choice to build something better. Word of Jake's decision spread as quickly as the rescue story had. Within days, representatives from a dozen species were requesting permission to visit New Haven and study human methods of resource sharing. The Collective Council declared these visits illegal, but their orders were increasingly ignored by ship captains who wanted to see the miraculous humans for themselves. Elder Gis Mora summoned Velthara to an emergency council session. The ancient Zephyrian leader had ruled her sector of space for 3 centuries, maintaining order through careful balance of power and strategic application of force. Now that balance was crumbling because of farmers who shared their food and mechanics, who helped strangers fix their ships. Commander, explain to me how a single primitive colony has managed to destabilize half the galaxy in less than a year, she demanded. Velthara stood before the council, knowing that his next words would determine not just his own fate, but the future of countless worlds. He had spent months living among the humans, watching them solve problems through cooperation instead of domination. He had seen children from 4 different settlements playing together as if they were all from the same family. He had watched Dr. Walsh save the life of a Zephyrian engineer without asking what species he belonged to, or what she would gain from helping him. Elder, the humans have not destabilized anything, Velthara said carefully. They have simply shown other species that stability built on fear is not the only option. Are you defending them, Commander? Velthara met her gaze steadily. I am stating facts. The humans do not seek to conquer or control anyone. They offer cooperation freely and ask for nothing in return except the right to live in peace. Species that accept their friendship become stronger, not weaker. And you believe this makes them less dangerous. Elder, I believe it makes them more dangerous than any weapon we have ever faced, because what they offer is something our enemies will fight to protect, while what we offer is something our allies endure because they have no choice. The council chamber fell silent. Elder Gis Mora looked around at the faces of her fellow rulers, seeing doubt where once there had been certainty. Reports were coming in from across collective space of ships refusing orders, colonies declaring independence, and entire species demanding representation in decisions that affected their worlds. What do you recommend? Commander Velthara took a breath that would change galactic history. I recommend we learn from them before it is too late. Back on New Haven, Amy Brooks was teaching flight techniques to a class that included humans, Zephyrians, and members of 3 other species who had arrived seeking asylum from collective persecution. Her students came from worlds scattered across thousands of light years, but they shared the same dream: to build societies based on cooperation instead of conquest. The most important thing about flying, Amy told her mixed group of students, is trusting the people flying with you. Up there, we are all just pilots trying to get home safely. As she watched her alien students practice the same maneuvers she had taught to human colonists, Amy realized something that would have terrified the Collective Council if they had known it. The galaxy was not being conquered by human armies or human technology. It was being transformed by human example, one friendship at a time. The network of cooperation that had started with one rescue mission was becoming something the Collective could not stop with ships and weapons. It was becoming an idea, and ideas were the most dangerous weapons of all. High above New Haven, Collective scout ships still maintained their watch, but now they were watching something that had never existed before. The birth of a truly galactic community built on trust instead of fear. The collective fleet arrived at New Haven like a storm of metal and fire, 200 warships that could have sterilized a dozen worlds. They took position around the small human colony, their weapons trained on settlements where children played in gardens and families shared their evening meals. Elder Gis Mora had come personally to end the threat that one farming community posed to galactic order. Jake Morrison stood on the hill overlooking his town and watched the alien ships blot out the stars. Around him, the people of New Haven went about their daily lives with the same quiet determination they had shown when facing crop diseases and equipment failures. They were afraid, but they were not broken. Jake, Amy Brooks called to him from the communications center. You need to see this. The first ship had appeared an hour after the collective fleet, emerging from hyperspace with weapons powered but not targeting the human settlements. It flew the colors of the Altarian people, the same species that had first asked the humans for help. Behind it came another ship, then another, then dozens more as word spread that the humans were under threat. Species I have never heard of are jumping into the system, Beth Adams reported, her voice mixing wonder and fear. 50 ships now, 70 over 100. Jake, they are coming from everywhere. The alien vessels were nothing like the massive collective warships. They were converted cargo haulers, mining ships, research vessels, and passenger transports that had been hastily armed by people who had never fought a war but refused to watch their friends be destroyed. They formed a ragged defensive line between the human colony and the collective fleet, outnumbered but determined. Elder Gis Mora watched the alien ships arrive with growing disbelief. In 3 centuries of rule, she had never seen anything like this. Species that had been enemies for millennia flew side by side to defend strangers they had never met. Her intelligence reports had warned that human influence was spreading, but she had not understood what that really meant until now. Elder, her communications officer, reported, "We are receiving surrender demands from 47 different species. They want us to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Consequences, Gis Mora repeated. The largest of the defending ships was barely 1/10 the size of her smallest cruiser. What consequences could they possibly threaten us with? Her answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Velthara's ship moved out of the collective formation and took position with the defenders. Within minutes, 12 more collective vessels followed him, their crews choosing to protect the humans rather than destroy them. Commander Velthara, Gis Mora's voice crackled across the communication channels. "Explain your actions immediately." Velthara's response was broadcast to every ship in the system, collective and defender alike. "Elder, I have lived among these humans for months. I have seen what they are building here, and I have learned what we have forgotten in our centuries of rule. The strongest civilizations are not built on fear. They are built on trust." More collective ships began moving toward the defensive line. Some were commanded by officers who had served under Velthara and trusted his judgment. Others were crewed by beings who had grown tired of enforcing rules they no longer believed in. The great fleet that had come to destroy the humans was tearing itself apart. On New Haven, Jake made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of hiding in bunkers or fleeing to the outer settlements, he walked to the communications center and opened a channel to every ship in the system. "This is Jake Morrison of the New Haven colony," he began, speaking to an audience of millions across dozens of species. "I am a farmer, not a politician or a military leader. 6 months ago, most of us had never seen an alien being. Today we are surrounded by friends who have risked their lives to protect us." He paused, looking out at the ships that filled the space around his world. "I do not understand all the politics and history that brought us to this moment, but I understand this. Every person here, human or alien, collective or rebel, wants the same things. We want our families to be safe. We want our children to have a better future. We want to live in a galaxy where helping strangers is rewarded instead of punished." Amy Brooks stood beside him, her voice joining his on the broadcast. "We did not ask to become symbols of anything. We just tried to help people who needed help. If that makes us dangerous to some galactic order, then maybe that order needs to change." Dr. Nina Walsh added her voice to theirs. "I have treated patients from 7 different species in the past month. Their blood may be different colors and their hearts may beat at different rates, but they all feel pain the same way. They all want to live. They all deserve compassion." One by one, the other colonists joined the broadcast. Danny Rodriguez talked about crops that could end famine on 100 worlds. Pete Collins described tools that could help any species build better homes. Linda Hayes spoke about teaching children from different worlds to read each other's languages and learn each other's stories. The message was simple but revolutionary. Cooperation was not just possible, it was profitable. Species that worked together became stronger than species that fought alone. The galaxy did not have to be a place where the strong preyed on the weak. Elder Gis Mora listened to the human voices and felt something she had not experienced in centuries: doubt. She had built her power on the assumption that intelligent beings were naturally selfish and aggressive. The humans were proving that assumption wrong simply by existing. "Elder," her tactical officer reported, 60% of our fleet has moved to join the defenders. If we attack now, we will be fighting our own people." Gis Mora looked at the tactical display and saw the end of everything she had built. But she also saw something else, the beginning of something that might be better. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had transformed it through example. "Open a channel to the human colony," she ordered. Jake Morrison's image appeared on her main screen, a simple man in simple clothes who had accidentally started a revolution. Behind him she could see the ordinary life of a farming community. People working, children playing, families living in peace. "Human," she said, and then stopped. The word felt inadequate. "Jake Morrison, you have destroyed the order that has kept this galaxy stable for 1,000 years. We have offered an alternative to that order," Jake replied calmly. "Whether people choose it is up to them. And if I choose to destroy you anyway?" Jake looked directly at her through the screen, his eyes showing no fear or hatred, only sadness. "Then you will prove that the old order cannot tolerate the new one, and everyone in the galaxy will know what that means." Gismora understood the trap she was in. If she destroyed the humans, she would make them martyrs to every species that dreamed of freedom. If she let them live, they would continue to prove that her way of ruling was unnecessary. Either choice would end the collective as she had known it. "What do you propose?" she asked. "A chance to try something different," Jake said. "Keep your ships, keep your territories, keep your authority over anyone who chooses to accept it. But allow worlds that want to try cooperation the freedom to do so. Let the galaxy decide for itself which way works better." It was the most dangerous proposition Gismora had ever heard, because she suspected she knew which way the galaxy would choose. But looking at the mixed fleet of defenders surrounding New Haven, she realized the choice had already been made. The only question was whether the transition would be peaceful or violent. "I will convene a galactic council," she said finally. "Representatives from every species, including yours. We will negotiate new arrangements that recognize the right of worlds to choose their own governments." The cheer that went up from the defending fleet could be heard across the star system. On New Haven, people poured into the streets to celebrate not victory, but the chance to keep being themselves. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the same spot on the hill overlooking his town, but everything was different now. The Galactic Cooperative had been established with headquarters on New Haven, not because the humans demanded it, but because no other world was trusted by so many different species. Representatives from 300 civilizations worked together in buildings that had once been farming equipment storage sheds. The collective still existed, but it had become one voice among many in the Galactic Council, instead of the only voice that mattered. Some worlds chose to remain under collective rule, preferring the security of strong central authority. Others formed new alliances based on shared interests and mutual cooperation. The galaxy had become a place where different ways of life could coexist instead of compete. Amy Brooks flew missions that carried diplomats and trade goods between former enemies who were learning to be partners. Dr. Nina Walsh had established the Interspecies Medical Exchange, training doctors from dozens of worlds to treat patients regardless of their species. Danny Rodriguez's agricultural techniques had ended famine on 47 planets. Velthara served as the first Zephyrian ambassador to the cooperative, working to help his own people adapt to a galaxy where cooperation was rewarded instead of feared. Elder Gismora had stepped down from her position of absolute authority, but remained as an elder stateswoman,